The peaceful arrival. In the year 2045, Earth was a place of hope and curiosity. People looked to the stars, dreaming of what lay beyond their blue planet. One sunny morning, the world was buzzing with excitement. News spread quickly. An alien princess was coming to Earth. Her name was Lyra, and she was from a distant planet called Zephora. As the great spaceship descended through the clouds, a mixture of awe and anxiety filled the air. The ship glowed with colors that danced like rainbows, and it landed softly on the grand lawn of Central Park in New York City. Thousands of humans gathered to witness this historic moment. Children laughed and pointed, while adults whispered about the wonders they might see. The ship's door opened slowly, and a gentle light poured out. Lyra stepped down, her long, flowing gown shimmering with colors that seemed to change with her movement. Her skin glowed softly, and her large, expressive eyes sparkled with kindness. The crowd fell silent as they took in the sight of the princess, their hearts filled with wonder. As she walked towards the crowd, a young human scientist named Dr. Even stepped forward. He had spent years studying the stars and was chosen to welcome the princess. With a nervous smile, he bowed slightly and said, "Welcome to Earth, Princess Lyra. We are honored by your presence." Lyra smiled back, her warmth melting the tension in the air. "Thank you, Dr. Even. I am happy to be here and learn about your world." Her voice was like music, soothing and calm. The crowd erupted in applause, cheering for the princess. They were excited to show her everything Earth had to offer. The city had prepared a week of celebrations, filled with music, dance, and culture. Lyra felt a wave of happiness wash over her. She had come to strengthen ties between their worlds, and it seemed that the humans were eager to welcome her. Over the next few days, Lyra explored the wonders of Earth. She visited art museums, attended concerts, and even learned to dance. Each experience was new and thrilling. She was especially fascinated by Earth's diverse cultures and traditions. She found joy in the small things, like watching children play and laughing with the people she met. Dr. Even became her guide and friend. He showed her the beauty of nature in Central Park, where trees whispered secrets and birds sang sweet songs. They spent hours talking about their worlds, sharing stories and dreams. Lyra learned about Earth's history, its struggles, and its triumphs. She shared tales of Zephora, a world filled with vibrant colors and advanced technology. However, as the days went by, Lyra began to notice something unsettling. While she was enjoying her time with the humans, there were whispers among their leaders. She overheard conversations about plans that made her heart sink. They spoke of using Zephora's resources and taking advantage of her people's kindness. One evening, while walking with Dr. Even, she looked up at the stars, feeling a sense of unease. "Even," she said softly, "what do you think about our worlds being together? Is it safe for us?" Dr. Even paused, sensing the weight of her words. "I believe it can be, but we must be careful. Not everyone has good intentions." His expression was serious, and Lyra felt a chill run down her spine. Despite her worries, Lyra pushed them aside. She wanted to believe in the goodness of humanity. After all, she had experienced so much kindness during her visit. The celebrations continued, and people from all over the world came to see the princess. They gave her gifts, flowers, and tokens of friendship, hoping to strengthen their bond. On the last night of her visit, a grand festival took place in Central Park. Thousands gathered to see the lights, hear the music, and celebrate unity. Lyra stood on a stage, surrounded by colorful decorations and glowing lanterns. She looked out at the crowd, her heart swelling with hope. "People of Earth," she began, her voice echoing in the night, "I am grateful for your warm welcome. Let us build a future together, filled with friendship and understanding." The crowd erupted in cheers, chanting her name. In that moment, Lyra felt like she truly belonged. But deep inside, a voice warned her that not all was as it seemed. As the fireworks lit up the sky, she couldn't shake the feeling that her trust in humanity might soon be tested. Later that night, as she prepared to return to her ship, Lyra was approached by a group of human leaders. Their smiles felt forced, and a sense of dread filled the air. One of them stepped forward, a man in a sharp suit. "Princess Lyra, we need to discuss our plans for the future." Lyra nodded, but a knot formed in her stomach. "Of course, but I hope it will be a discussion of friendship." As the leaders began to speak, Lyra realized that her visit was not just a celebration. The seeds of betrayal were being sown. The humans were not just interested in friendship. They had other motives. And as the night wore on, the tension in the air grew thicker, hinting at the storm that was about to break. The peaceful arrival was only the beginning, and soon the princess would have to choose between her faith in humanity and the safety of her people. The gathering storm. The festival night faded into a tense morning. Princess Lyra awoke in her luxurious quarters aboard the ship, feeling the weight of the world pressing down on her shoulders. The beauty of Earth now felt overshadowed by an unsettling feeling. She gazed out of the window at the city below, its skyscrapers glimmering in the early sunlight, but her heart was heavy with doubt. After breakfast, Lyra met Dr. Even in Central Park. He was waiting for her by a beautiful fountain, where the water danced in the light. His expression was serious, reflecting the uncertainty that hung in the air. "Good morning, Princess," he greeted her with a slight bow. "We need to talk about the meeting last night." "Yes, we do," she replied, her voice steady but tinged with concern. "I felt uneasy about what they were saying. It seemed like they had plans beyond friendship." Dr. Even nodded, running a hand through his hair. "I felt it too. They spoke of collaboration, but their tone was different. It was more about using your planet's resources. We need to be cautious." As they walked through the park, they discussed strategies to protect Sci-Fi. Lyra shared her ideas, emphasizing the importance of trust and mutual respect. "If we are to work together, it must be a partnership," she insisted, "not one where one side takes advantage of the other." Their conversation was interrupted by a group of humans approaching. The leaders from the previous night had returned, their faces serious and guarded. The man in the sharp suit, Director Hastings, stepped forward. "Princess Lyra, we have important matters to discuss regarding the future of our worlds," he said, his voice smooth but lacking warmth. Lyra's instincts flared. "I am listening," she replied, trying to mask her unease. Hastings motioned for the others to join him. "We believe that combining our technologies could lead to great advancements. However, we need access to Zephora's unique resources to achieve this." Lyra exchanged glances with Dr. Even, who looked equally alarmed. "What kind of resources do you mean?" she asked cautiously. "Your planet is rich in energy sources that we have never seen before," Hastings replied, a hint of greed in his eyes. "We could create technologies that would change the balance of power in the galaxy." Lyra felt a knot in her stomach. "You speak of power, not partnership. We cannot allow our resources to be exploited." The atmosphere shifted as tension crackled in the air. Hastings maintained his confident demeanor. "We are not asking for permission. We are offering a proposal. If you refuse, it could lead to misunderstandings between our peoples. And we wouldn't want that, would we?" Lyra's heart raced. She realized that the stakes were higher than she had anticipated. "Misunderstandings or threats?" she countered, her voice steady. "Zephora will not be a pawn in anyone's game." The other leaders shifted uncomfortably, their eyes darting among themselves. Hastings smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You will reconsider, Princess. We believe in the strength of our alliance. But remember, the strongest species do not easily back down." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving a heavy silence behind. Once they were gone, Dr. Even turned to Lyra. "We need to alert your people. They might be planning something we're not prepared for." Lyra nodded, her mind racing. "I'll contact my father, King Zephyrus. He must know about this. We cannot let them exploit our trust." As they walked back through Central Park, Lyra felt a sense of urgency growing within her. The beauty around her felt like a facade, hiding the growing darkness beneath. The humans' intentions were becoming clearer, and it frightened her. She had come to Earth with hopes of peace, but now she faced a potential war. That evening, Lyra contacted her father using the advanced communication technology on her ship. The screen flickered to life, revealing King Zephyrus, his wise eyes filled with concern. "Lyra, my daughter, I have sensed a disturbance in the Force. Speak to me. What troubles you?" "Father, I believe the humans may not have our best interests at heart," she explained, her voice trembling. "They want our resources, and their leaders are not honest. I fear they are planning to use us for their own gain." The king listened intently, his expression darkening. "You must be cautious. We have always valued diplomacy, but if they threaten our way of life, we will defend Zutphora." "I understand, Father," Lyra replied, determination settling in her chest. "I will protect my people. I must find a way to turn this around before it escalates." As she ended the call, Lyra felt a renewed sense of purpose. The peaceful arrival had given way to a gathering storm, and she would not let her people down. With Dr. Evan's help, she began devising a plan to uncover the truth about the humans' intentions and to protect Zutphora from any threats. Days passed, filled with hidden meetings and hushed conversations. Lyra and Evan worked diligently to gather information. They spoke to friendly humans who shared concerns about the leaders' motives. Many expressed a desire for true friendship and were horrified by the idea of exploitation. One evening, as they walked through the quiet park, Evan turned to Lyra. "We need to take a stand, Lyra. If we don't act now, it might be too late." "I agree," she replied, her resolve stronger than ever. "We will hold a summit, inviting those who wish for a genuine alliance. It's time to expose the truth." With a plan in place, they prepared for the upcoming summit, knowing that the future of their worlds depended on their ability to unite those who truly believed in peace. But as they gathered their allies, an unseen threat loomed closer, ready to strike when least expected. The Summit of Truth. The day of the summit arrived, and anticipation hung heavy in the air. Princess Lyra stood at the entrance of the grand hall where the meeting would take place, her heart pounding with a mix of hope and anxiety. She had invited leaders from various factions, humans who sought true partnership, Zephyran diplomats, and representatives from nearby planets. This gathering could either solidify their alliance or shatter it completely. The hall was beautifully decorated, with banners representing both Earth and Zutphora hanging side by side. Lyra had taken great care to create an atmosphere of unity. As the attendees began to arrive, she felt a spark of hope ignite within her. Perhaps this would be the moment they could turn the tide and ensure peace. Dr. Evan stood by her side, his expression serious. "Are you ready for this, Lyra?" "There's no turning back now." "I have to be," she replied, her voice steady. "We owe it to our people to stand up for what's right." As the last guests settled into their seats, Lyra took a deep breath and stepped forward. "Welcome, everyone," she began, her voice echoing in the hall. "Today, we gather to discuss our future, one of cooperation and trust between our worlds." Applause erupted in the hall, and Lyra smiled, grateful for the support. However, she noticed a few figures in the back, familiar faces from the previous meeting. The leaders of the powerful factions were there, their eyes calculating, and their presence sent a shiver down her spine. After her opening remarks, she invited Dr. Evan to present his findings on the potential dangers posed by their rivals. He stepped forward, projecting a holographic display that revealed evidence of the human leaders' intentions. "These are communications intercepted between the factions that wish to exploit Zutphora's resources," he explained. "They view our planet as a treasure trove to be mined, not as a partner to be cherished." Gasps filled the room. Lyra watched as the faces of the attendees transformed from curiosity to concern. Whispers spread like wildfire, and she felt a surge of determination. She turned to the crowd. "We must not allow ourselves to be manipulated. We are stronger together, but only if we choose to support one another. As the discussions grew heated, a familiar voice interrupted. It was Director Hastings, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "Princess, this is an interesting theory, but do you have proof that the humans want to harm you? Surely, you don't believe all humans are the same. Do you truly think we will sit by while you exploit us?" Lyra shot back, her voice unwavering. The records speak for themselves. "This isn't just a theory. This is our reality." Several attendees nodded in agreement, echoing her sentiments. The room was filled with passionate voices, each advocating for cooperation and mutual respect. Lyra felt the tide shifting, and she couldn't help but smile. However, Hastings was not finished. "You talk of unity, yet your people are not blameless. You have secrets of your own, don't you, Princess? What about the rumors of weapons development on Zephora?" The hall fell silent, and all eyes turned to Lyra. She felt her heart race as doubt crept in. "Those rumors are unfounded," she replied, forcing herself to maintain her composure. "Zephora stands for peace, not war. We only seek to defend ourselves." Hastings smirked. "And that's what makes you a threat. If you truly wish for peace, you would surrender any means of defense. How can we trust you?" Before Lyra could respond, a voice emerged from the crowd. It was Captain Marlowe, a respected human leader who had shown support for Zephora. "Lyra is right. We are all here to forge a better future. To surrender our defenses is to invite chaos. We need to respect one another's sovereignty." Lyra's heart swelled with gratitude as more voices joined in support. The tension in the room began to ease as the focus shifted from accusations to discussions about cooperation. Hours passed as they debated the terms of their alliance, with Lyra emphasizing the importance of transparency and shared knowledge. They discussed creating joint projects to explore resources ethically and share technology for the benefit of both worlds. Finally, as the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Lyra stood before the assembly once more. "It is clear that we all desire a future built on trust and mutual respect. Together, we can create an alliance that benefits everyone. Let us sign this agreement, marking the beginning of a new era." As the signatures flowed, she felt a weight lift from her shoulders. The energy in the room shifted, and a newfound optimism blossomed. They were not just signing documents. They were forging bonds that would withstand any storm. But just as they celebrated, an alarm blared throughout the hall. The holographic display flickered to life, showing a live feed of an incoming fleet of warships approaching Earth. Panic erupted, and Lyra's heart sank. "What is happening?" she demanded, her voice rising above the chaos. Dr. Evans stepped forward, his face pale. "It appears the factions who oppose our alliance are not willing to back down. They're launching an attack." Lyra's heart raced as she realized the precariousness of their situation. They had barely established their alliance, and now they faced a real threat. "We must prepare to defend ourselves," she declared, her voice steady despite the fear bubbling inside her. "We cannot let them destroy what we've just built." The crowd rallied around her, and together they began to strategize, determined to protect their newfound partnership. The summit had brought them together, but now they had to stand united against a common enemy. The battle for their future was just beginning, and Lyra knew they would need every ounce of strength they possessed to survive. The gathering storm. As chaos erupted in the Grand Hall, Princess Lyra quickly regained her composure. She scanned the faces of the attendees. Fear and uncertainty flickered in their eyes, but so did determination. They had just forged a fragile alliance, and now it was threatened by outside forces. They couldn't let fear dictate their response. "Listen," Lyra shouted above the noise, raising her hands to command attention. "We cannot panic. We have just signed an agreement for peace and cooperation. Now is the time to put that into action. We must prepare to defend our homes together." Dr. Evans stepped beside her, his expression serious. "We need to organize quickly. Our defenses must be ready. We should send out a call to all available forces on Earth and Sephora. This is not just a fight for our alliance. It is a fight for our very survival." The crowd quieted as leaders nodded in agreement. The human and Zephyran representatives exchanged glances, their shared urgency overcoming their initial fears. They were all aware of what was at stake. Lyra moved quickly, gathering the leaders around her. "We need to establish a command center. Dr. Even, can you coordinate our forces?" "Absolutely," he replied, already tapping on his device. "I'll connect with the military on Earth and mobilize them. They'll need a strategy for defense." "Good. I'll handle the communication with the Zephyran forces," Lyra added. She turned to Captain Marlowe, who stood close by, ready to assist. "Captain, can you organize a quick briefing for the human military?" "Consider it done, Your Highness," Marlowe replied, determination in his voice. He rushed off to gather the human leaders, leaving Lyra feeling the weight of responsibility settle heavily on her shoulders. With the crowd breaking up into groups, Lyra took a deep breath. She couldn't let fear take hold of her or her people. As she moved through the hall, she heard snippets of conversation, strategies, concerns, and defiance. The air buzzed with adrenaline, and she felt the energy of cooperation igniting within her. Within moments, a group of Zephyran warriors approached her. Their leader, a tall figure with shimmering blue skin and piercing eyes, bowed respectfully. "Princess, we are ready to defend our planet. We have trained for combat and can assist in any way you need." Lyra smiled, grateful for their support. "We will need your expertise. If you can deploy your forces near the perimeter of our atmosphere, it will give us more time to prepare." The Zephyran leader nodded and moved off to rally his troops, and Lyra turned her attention back to the command center. They needed to act fast. As she made her way to the strategy room, she encountered Dr. Even once more. "I've managed to reach the human fleet," he said. "They're ready to deploy at a moment's notice. They want to know what you need from them." Lyra's heart raced as she considered the options. Tell them to set up defensive positions around Earth. They need to monitor for any incoming ships and be prepared to engage. As Dr. Even relayed her orders, Lyra moved to the large holographic map of the solar system displayed on the wall. She zoomed in on Earth, seeing the blinking red dot representing the enemy ships approaching fast. The sight sent a chill down her spine. "Princess," Marlowe called as he entered the room, flanked by several human officers. "We've got the fleet in position. They're ready to protect Earth, but we need to decide on our next steps." "We can't just wait for them to attack," Lyra insisted. "We need to make a preemptive strike. If we can disrupt their approach, we might stand a better chance." Marlowe considered her suggestion. "That could work, but we need to be strategic about it. We don't know the full strength of their fleet. We can send a small group of ships to scout ahead," Lyra proposed. "They can gather intel and engage if necessary. It's a risk, but it might give us the advantage we need." The officers nodded in agreement. "It's worth a shot," one of them said. "We'll need to move fast." They quickly devised a plan. A small fleet of human and Zephyran ships would head toward the enemy. They would gather intelligence and return to inform the command center. Lyra felt a rush of adrenaline as they finalized their strategy. Just then, the alarms blared once more, this time with urgency. An officer rushed in, breathless. "Princess, the enemy ships are closer than we thought. They're entering our atmosphere." Panic threatened to rise, but Lyra took a deep breath. "Everyone, to your stations. We must defend our worlds. Prepare for battle." Her voice cut through the fear, and the room sprang to life as everyone moved with purpose. As Lyra took her position at the command center, her heart raced. The alliance was still new, but now they had to fight for it. She could feel the strength of those around her, humans and Zephyrians alike, united in a common cause. "Let's show them what we can do," she said, determination filling her voice. "Today, we fight not just for our homes, but for our future." With her command given, she braced for the battle that lay ahead, knowing that together, They could face any challenge. The storm was gathering, and it was time for humanity and Zephora to stand strong against their foes. You said, the first strike. As the alarms blared and the command center buzzed with activity, Princess Lyra felt the weight of leadership resting heavily on her shoulders. The time for action had come. Reports flooded in, detailing the enemy's movements as the combined forces of Earth and Zephora prepared for their first strike. Status report. Lyra called, her voice steady despite the chaos. Dr. Even, standing at a console, quickly relayed information. The enemy fleet has entered our atmosphere, he said, his fingers flying over the controls. They appear to be deploying smaller ships for a ground assault. Our defenses are active, but we need to act fast to intercept them. Lyra nodded, determination igniting within her. We cannot let them land. If they gain a foothold, it will be much harder to push them back. We need our fighter pilots ready to engage. Captain Marlowe stepped forward, his expression resolute. I'll ensure the pilots are scrambled and ready for takeoff immediately. We'll intercept them before they can reach the ground. Lyra turned her gaze to the holographic display showing the enemy fleet. A cluster of ships was breaking off and heading toward a vulnerable area near the coast. That's where they'll strike. We must protect those regions at all costs. With swift decisions made, the command center transformed into a hive of activity. Human and Zephyrin officers exchanged orders, coordinating their forces with remarkable efficiency. Lyra couldn't help but feel a swell of pride. They had come together, united against a common threat. Princess, Dr. Even said, his voice tense, I suggest we deploy the drones to provide aerial support. They can distract the enemy while our fighters engage. Do it, she commanded. We need to buy time for the ground forces to prepare. As the drones launched into the sky, Lyra watched the live feed on the holographic screen. The small machines zipped through the air, drawing the enemy's fire as they darted in and out of formation. Each moment counted. The fighters would soon be airborne, and their timing had to be perfect. Fighter pilots are ready for launch. Captain Marlowe shouted, excitement building in his voice. They'll head out in 3, 2, 1. With a deafening roar, the fighter jets soared into the sky, their engines igniting the air with power. Lyra felt a thrill of hope. They were finally fighting back. Keep the communications open, she instructed, her eyes glued to the display. We need to know what's happening out there. As the battle unfolded, the scene outside the command center became chaotic. Explosions lit up the sky as the fighters engaged the enemy. Lyra watched intently, her heart racing with each explosion and every near miss. Princess, Dr. Even interrupted her focus. We're receiving reports from the front lines. The enemy is more organized than we anticipated. They're focusing their attacks on the eastern coast. Redirect our fighters to support the eastern defense. Lyra ordered, her voice sharp. We cannot let them breach our lines. The command center hummed with urgency as new orders were sent to the pilots. The holographic display flickered with updates, showing the movement of the enemy fleet. Lyra's hands clenched into fists. They had to hold their ground. The sound of alarms and the roar of engines filled the air as the battle raged on. As Lyra monitored the situation, a message came through from the front lines. Princess, a voice crackled over the comms. The enemy is attempting to deploy ground forces. We need backup. Ira's heart sank. They had to act quickly. Captain Marlowe, send reinforcements to the eastern coast immediately. We cannot allow them to gain control of that area. Yes, Your Highness. Marlowe responded, already issuing orders. Lyra felt the pressure mounting as the stakes rose higher. They were fighting not just for Earth and Zephora, but for their very existence. She took a deep breath, forcing herself to stay calm. They had to remain united and strong. Suddenly, a loud explosion shook the command center, and the lights flickered. What was that? Lyra demanded, gripping the edge of the console for stability. We're under attack, an officer yelled. A section of the building has been hit. Evacuate the non-combat personnel. Lyra ordered, her voice steady. We need to secure the command center. All available forces move to protect this location. The chaos grew as people scrambled to follow her commands. Lyra remained focused, knowing that the battle for their lives was just beginning. The enemy was relentless, and their strength was formidable. As the sound of gunfire echoed outside, Lyra felt a surge of determination. We will not be defeated, she shouted, her voice carrying over the chaos. We are the guardians of our worlds, and we will fight until our last breath. Dr. Even looked at her, his eyes reflecting her resolve. You're right, Princess. We will stand together. With renewed energy, the combined forces of Earth and Zephora rallied. They were more than allies. They were a family now, bound by the fight for survival. Together, they would face whatever came next, refusing to back down. The battle raged on outside, but inside the command center, a spirit of defiance surged. Lyra knew they would give everything to protect their homes. The enemy may have underestimated humanity's resolve, but they would soon learn that together, they were a force to be reckoned with. As the first strike began, Lyra held on to hope. Today, they would show their enemies that they would not go down without a fight. The gathering storm. As the sounds of battle echoed through the command center, Princess Lyra felt a strange calm wash over her. The chaos outside was relentless, but within, she focused on what was most important, rallying her allies and strategizing for the next phase of their defense. They had fought bravely so far, but the enemy was powerful and their determination fierce. Status report, Lyra called out, her voice cutting through the noise. Dr. Even was at his console, typing furiously. Ground forces are holding, but we are facing heavy resistance, he replied, his brow furrowed in concentration. The enemy is using advanced tactics and weaponry we haven't seen before. Our drones are engaged, but they're taking losses. Lyra bit her lip, her heart racing. They needed to adapt quickly if they wanted to turn the tide of this battle. What about our reinforcements? Are they on their way to the Eastern Front? Yes, they're mobilizing now, Dr. Even assured her. But we need to give them cover. If we can create a distraction, it might give our ground troops the edge they need. Agreed, Lyra said, already formulating a plan. Let's send a squadron to the western flank. If we can draw the enemy's attention away from the east, we can buy our troops the time they need. Captain Marlowe, she called, turning to him. I need you to organize an immediate airstrike on the western front. Make it look like a major assault to divert their forces. Yes, Your Highness, Marlowe responded, his eyes bright with purpose. I'll coordinate with the pilots right away. As he left to carry out her orders, Lyra took a moment to gather her thoughts. She understood the weight of her position. The lives of many depended on her decisions, and she had to be strong for them all. Suddenly, the room shook again as another explosion reverberated through the building. A rush of alarms blared, and the lights flickered once more. Status, Lyra shouted, feeling the tension rising in the air. Direct hit on the southeast wing. An officer reported, panic in his voice. We're losing structural integrity. Evacuate that area, Lyra ordered, her heart racing. And secure the remaining exits. We can't let the enemy breach this command center. While chaos erupted around her, Lyra steeled herself, reminding herself of what was at stake. They needed to push forward. Keep the lines of communication open, she instructed. I want constant updates from the front lines. Dr. Even nodded, his fingers dancing over the keyboard. I'll monitor the situation and relay information as it comes in. As they prepared for the next strike, Lyra turned her attention to the holographic display. It showed their forces engaged in battle, the bright colors of their ships contrasting sharply against the dark backdrop of space. Despite the dire circumstances, she found herself filled with a sense of pride. They were united, fighting for their home. Suddenly, a voice crackled through the intercom. Princess Lyra, we have reports of ground troops advancing toward the main city. Lyra's heart sank. How many? Estimated 2 battalions, heavily armed, and making rapid progress. The officer replied, urgency in his tone. We need to send reinforcements immediately. Lyra commanded, and activate the automated defenses around the city. We cannot let them breach our walls. As orders were issued, a loud crash echoed outside, followed by the unmistakable sound of gunfire. Lyra felt her heart race again, adrenaline flooding her veins. This was not just a battle for territory. It was a fight for their very existence. Princess, we have eyes on the enemy, Dr. Even reported. They're preparing to breach the gates. Our defenses must hold. Activate the shield generators. Lyra shouted. We need to buy ourselves more time. In the command center, officers rushed to execute her orders, the atmosphere thick with tension. Lyra felt the weight of their eyes on her, and she pushed herself to stay composed. They needed a leader, and she would be that leader. As the shield generators hummed to life, Lyra watched the holographic display. The enemy forces were advancing, their weapons blazing. It was a sight she never wanted to see. Then, a surge of hope sparked within her. We have one chance, she said, her voice rising above the chaos. If we can regroup our forces and counterattack at the same time, we can turn the tide in our favor. Captain Marlowe returned, his face determined. I've got the pilots ready for an airstrike on the advancing troops. We can hit them from above while our ground forces engage from the front. Do it, Lyra said firmly. And make sure to coordinate with the automated defenses. We need to create a wall of fire that they can't penetrate. As the command center buzzed with energy, Lyra took a deep breath. She knew that failure was not an option. They had to protect their home and their people. It was time to fight back. Outside, the sound of battle intensified. The clash of weapons, the roar of engines, and the cries of soldiers filled the air. Lyra could feel the storm gathering, and she was ready to face it head-on. As they prepared for the impending conflict, Lyra glanced at Dr. Even. We can win this, she said, a fierce conviction in her heart. Together, we are stronger than they can imagine. And with that, the battle for their worlds began anew, the fate of humanity and Zephora hanging in the balance. The final stand. The atmosphere in the command center was electric, filled with tension and determination. Outside, the sounds of battle reached a fever pitch, punctuated by explosions and the distant cries of soldiers. Princess Lyra stood at the front, eyes fixed on the holographic display, watching the enemy forces surge toward the city gates like a dark wave. Status report, she commanded, her heart pounding. Dr. Even was at his console, sweat glistening on his forehead. The enemy is less than a mile from the main gates. Our ground forces are engaged, but they're struggling against their advanced weaponry, he reported, his voice steady despite the urgency. We need to reinforce them now. Activate the automated turrets, Lyra ordered, feeling the weight of leadership settle firmly on her shoulders. And coordinate with our airstrike team. They must hit those enemy troops hard. Captain Marlowe stepped forward, his expression resolute. The pilots are ready for the airstrike, Princess. They're waiting for your command. Give them the signal. Lyra shouted, her voice echoing in the command center. Now, as Marlowe relayed the order, Lyra turned back to the display. She could see the enemy advancing, their ships looming closer with each passing moment. The air was thick with the promise of conflict, and Lyra felt a fire ignite within her. With a sudden rush, the sky lit up as the airstrike began. Bombs fell like rain, exploding among the enemy troops and sending plumes of smoke and debris into the air. Cheers erupted from the command center as they watched the enemy forces stagger under the assault. Direct hit. We've disrupted their advance, Dr. Even called out, his voice rising with excitement. But it's not enough. Lyra responded, her determination unwavering. We need to push them back. Suddenly, an alert sounded, and the lights flickered ominously, shield integrity failing. An officer shouted, We're taking heavy fire from their artillery. Reinforce the shields. Double the power. Lyra commanded, her mind racing. They were on the edge of disaster, and she had to think fast. The room hummed with activity as officers scrambled to execute her orders. Lyra focused on the display again, her heart sinking as she saw the enemy regrouping. They weren't finished yet. Deploy the ground forces to flank them, she said, pointing at the screen. We need to catch them off guard while they're still reeling from the airstrike. Marlowe nodded, already relaying the orders. All ground units, move to flank positions. Engage the enemy with everything you've got. As the ground forces moved into position, Lyra's gaze drifted back to the display. She could see her soldiers, brave and determined, moving with purpose. They were fighting not just for victory, but for their very survival. But then, a chilling message came through the comms. Princess Lyra, we're detecting a massive enemy warship entering the atmosphere. A heavy silence fell over the command center. Lyra's heart dropped. This was the moment they had feared most. The warship, bristling with weapons and power, descended like a harbinger of doom. What's our status on the defenses? She asked, her voice tight with concern. We're scrambling our best fighters, but the warship's shields are impenetrable, an officer reported, panic creeping into his tone. Not if we use the EMP, Lyra exclaimed, her mind racing. If we can disable their systems, it might give our forces a chance. Can we deploy it in time? Marlowe asked, urgency etched on his face. We have to, Lyra insisted. Every second counts. With a determined nod, Marlowe turned to coordinate the EMP deployment. Lyra felt a surge of hope. They had faced impossible odds before, and they could do it again. As the warship descended, Lyra took a deep breath, grounding herself. Remember, we fight for our homes, our families, and each other, she said, her voice steady. We are stronger together. The command center erupted in cheers, a wave of determination washing over the team. They were united, ready to fight against the overwhelming odds. Suddenly, the warship's cannons fired, beams of energy slicing through the sky. Lyra watched in horror as one of their defense towers was obliterated, flames erupting into the air. Return fire, she shouted. We cannot let them breach our defenses. The sound of weapons firing filled the room, and Lyra's heart raced as the battle raged on. The EMP was prepared, and as it activated, a wave of energy pulsed outward, momentarily disrupting the enemy systems. Now, attack, Marlowe shouted, his voice breaking through the chaos. Their fighters surged forward, using the moment of weakness to unleash a barrage of firepower on the warship. The enemy forces faltered, and Lyra felt a glimmer of hope. But the war was far from over. The enemy regrouped, their resilience pushing against her troops with unyielding force. The city's defenses shook as explosions rocked the ground. Dr. Even. Status on our defenses, Lyra demanded, her heart pounding. Systems are holding, but barely. We need to stabilize the shields or we won't last much longer, he replied, sweat pouring down his face. Do what you must, Lyra shouted, determination burning in her eyes. We will not falter. As the battle raged on, Lyra felt the weight of responsibility pressing on her, but she also felt the strength of her people beside her. They were not just fighting for survival, they were fighting for their future. With each decision, each command, Lyra pushed forward. She would not allow her people to be lost. The storm of war raged around her, but within her heart, she held on to hope, the hope that they could emerge victorious, that they could protect their home and each other. As the sun dipped low on the horizon, casting a crimson glow over the battlefield, Lyra knew that the final stand was upon them. They were ready to face whatever came next, united and unyielding, a force to be reckoned with in the galaxy.